Welcome to All Things Financial with Jack Driscoll. Each week, Jack takes on all things you thought were hard to understand about your finances and makes it fun, easy, but most of all interesting. From insurance to the best way to save your money and squeeze the most out of the dollars you put aside for your rainy day. And now, you have a friend in the money business. Here's your host, Jack Driscoll.
Welcome back again, everyone, to another edition of All Things Financial. Well, we're at the turn of another year, and this time of year I like to take, as the whole process of financial planning, to take a step back and look forward. I do that with our practice, I like to do it with my individual goals. I like to do it with our company goals. I like to do it with our clients' goals. Just looking at our lives. And I wanted to share it with you too, that as we all know, we get the time to doing New Year's resolutions. We get the time to looking at year end. And I really want everyone to stop and think about looking back over the past year. Think about what you did at the beginning of last year, setting goals, and see how far you've come, and look back over your results and see how much we failed, how much we've succeeded, and just remake plans for next year to correct some of the mistakes we might have made, or to pat ourselves on the back for some of the successes we've had, and to continue those practices. A lot of times what we find in life and in, of course, financial planning is when you build in habits at the beginning of each year and try to follow those practices as habits, we seem to get a lot more done than if we just form goals and almost as dreams or wishes, but don't form the core framework of the habits in our daily lives and our weekly lives to help us day by day accomplish those goals in a step-by-step fashion. So in all areas of your life, but especially in financial planning, from my perspective, I just thought it would be a good time to remind everyone to stop, think backwards, take a step back, like I say, and a look forward. So on the step back part, I'd like everyone to just review all the good things that we've done in the past year, from our planning steps and then from our action steps. So everyone can pat yourselves on the shoulder if you increased your deductions for your 401k plans. If you increased your contribution percentage, as I recommended last year, if you've taken a look and done the life insurance policy audit and looked at your group employee benefits and made sure you had disability insurance protection, made sure you're protecting your families with your really asset protection when I talk about auto and homeowners insurance, making sure that you're covered if something happens to you, that you don't get wiped out. And if you looked at your asset allocation strategies for your retirement, your college savings, then I want you to pat yourselves on the back. If you went through the FAFSA last year, like we talked about, and made sure you qualified for the maximum amount of financial aid available and didn't miss anything, and went to the college financial aid offices and made sure that there were state and maybe even university alumni programs that you might have qualified for that you didn't know about, then again, you can pat yourselves on the back for following some of the tips and strategies that we talked about on last year's year-end planning. And then we get to the point where we went through our year-end tax planning a year ago and are at the beginning of the year tax strategies for this year. So any of you or all of you who went through those exercises and improved your finances as a result, you can pat yourselves on the back because you're further ahead now at the end of this year than you would have been had you not made those strategy changes and planning strategies really at the beginning of last year. For those of you who may not have been as attentive to your strategies and laid out that financial roadmap that we went through, you're in luck because we're about to do it again, and I'll teach you the basic areas to go through to put together a core framework, as I said, of a financial plan. And it's a roadmap that you can then follow your progress day by day, week by week, through habits, and then month by month through review and reviewing your progress throughout the year. You'll find you get a lot farther than you thought you could. Now, it all starts with where we start in the process last year, the year before, and the year before that of, are you paying yourself first? So the first step, I think, in financial planning is really just reviewing, are you living paycheck to paycheck? And without a goal and without a plan and without the roadmap, it's easy to fall into living paycheck to paycheck and feeling like you're not getting anywhere, like you're in a rut or a hamster wheel or going through quicksand, however you see yourselves, not being able to get out or dig out. I think a lot of that results from either difficult circumstances that might have come, and hopefully they're isolated, or it may just be a habitual pattern of every paycheck not being enough to get you through all the bills that come and all the things you have to deal with all the time and the expenses. So there's a way around that. And a lot of times what it is just reviewing your situation. So if you don't have QuickBooks, which is a software program, I want you to look at whichever bank you're banking with. Do they have any help or assistance on either software or with your checking account can coordinate and pretty much work with some of these software programs like QuickBooks? And the reason I say that is if they'll integrate the information with a program like QuickBooks, then without you doing any or much effort at all, over a period of months, and especially over a year, you can then look back and see, I didn't realize I was spending so much on groceries, or I didn't realize we spent so much on eating out. I didn't realize this or that, and you'll see some areas that you may have control over you didn't realize, and you may have more control than you think over that budget that seems to be getting the best of you. So those little things do count. Those coffees in the morning and the, like I say, the eating out, those things do count. It is a concept called pay yourself first that most people are missing out. And that concept is if you can try out of every paycheck to set something aside for yourselves first for your future, and then let all the bills have all the rest, that's the first starting step to the concept of pay yourself first, which is getting some control over your finances and your financial future. And what it really is a concept of you get $100, you get $1,000, whatever comes into the checking account, because you don't see your pays usually, your checking account does. So many times what you'll do is you'll automate these processes that I talk about, because if you try to do it manually, it just won't happen. So if you have an auto sweep set up out of your checking account into a savings account at that same bank, you say, I don't have a savings account, open one. It doesn't matter that it doesn't pay any interest. You set up a savings account and you auto sweep out of the checking account every month or every week. Usually it's monthly, the easiest way to do it, or every pay. You could check with your bank. If you could set up something automated to pull money from the checking account after each paycheck's received, whether it's $5 or 5%, that's your choice, but something. And I don't mean set aside, swept into the savings account to then use for if the furnace breaks. I mean setting something aside for forever money, for your future money, for money that if you didn't sweep it aside, you were going to spend it anyway. It was going to be spent and not noticed or not noticeably spent. So if you sweep that aside and don't spend it on anything, but actually set it aside to start building for your future. That's called pay yourself first. That concept in itself is the start and the starting seed to gaining control over your financial future. When you do that, the first $5 or 5%, you'll find you don't notice that and you don't miss that. What you'll find is you have just as little money left over at the end of the month as you did before you did that. And you'll find that all the bills got paid just as well as before you were doing that. So many people find after that exercise, it's helpful if they're not looking at the savings account, because you're tempted every day, every week, every month. Really, there's never enough money, so a bill comes up, and with that money in the savings account, a lot of people will then be easily tempted to, well, it's in there, let's go get that and relieve the pressure. But that's the wrong thing to do. You'll find that if the money wasn't in the savings account, you'd have to do something different, which means, oh, well, we can't go out to dinner this week because this bill needs paid. So we're going to have to eat in. You're going to have to make different sacrifices. So once that money's set aside, I need you to see that as money spent or burnt or lost or gone. Otherwise, this plan won't work. Now, when someone builds up to this plan of pay yourself first, that is the beginning foundation for gaining control over your financial future. Now for all the rest. Let's look at all the rest. What's consuming all these bills? What's taking all that money? It can be mortgage, it can be health expenses, it can be paying your taxes, it can be food, groceries, gasoline for the car, it can be car expenses, whatever it is, it's life. So we don't want people to go on a budget because nobody will follow it any better than a diet. But we do want to restrain our spending to within our means. So that means having some guidelines at least of how much, having some control over what we spend is directly related to how much we make. So what we do with the rest, after we pay ourselves first, with the rest, what we want to do is look at our necessities, the expenses that we must pay as our main necessities are normally mortgage payment or rent, utilities, usually car transportation expense, some clothing expense, definitely the food, gas in the car, things like that. And what you'll want to do is make a list of these are our core expenses. These are the things that we have to do no matter what, and add those up and know what they are. The reason you need to do that is you'll be surprised at how much they are. If you look back over the last 3 or 4 months, you'll be surprised at how much of your pays that consumes. So you want to be careful there. And then the second area is on some of the expenses that you are spending on and want to, which is enjoying a little bit of life now. And that's, you know, the kids and hockey and the different expenses involved with the kids and raising the kids and helping them have some of the things you want them to have. And you build that in so you know a good idea of what that expense really is. And that's where we run into our problem then, because we say, what's left over? And that what's left over is what we really have a lot of control over, but there's not normally much of it. So we have to be a little bit careful there. When we get those 3 stages in just categorizing expenses, that's a good first step. The next area I want you to look at is, okay, what control do we have over those expenses? Our mortgage, should we refinance? Our credit cards, should we stop those credit cards? Do we need credit cards, or can't we run our expenses based on each pay? And then I want you to look at all the different areas that you really do have control over. You have control over how you package your expenses on your financial planning, which means where you're going for your savings and your insurances and your life insurance, your car insurance, your home insurance, Are they as efficiently done as they could be? Are they with the right sources? Should you be shopping those? Do you even know how to shop those? Most people don't know how to shop for car insurance, home insurance, life insurance, or any type of insurance. So what happens is you go out, you either go online or you make phone calls. Somebody comes through with a cheaper price and you switch. And that's the extent of your shopping for insurance, saying, look, I saved money, I can afford more to go out and eat, which are all usually wrong decisions and components of making a wrong decision. And then you get into the point of maybe having less than what you had before and don't even know which areas were compromised or cut. And then later on, something happens and you need that very insurance, the car insurance or the home insurance or the life or disability or whatever it is, and you find out you don't have anywhere near the coverages that you needed because you weren't focused on coverage, you were focused on premium. So that's a dangerous area for a lot of people to shop, but it is an area we want to be concise on to make sure we're not wasting money unnecessarily and that we're maximizing our coverage. It is. So I get into that in some of the shows, but I'm just touching on it here around the beginning of the year. Now, another area are taxes. You know, sometimes people say we don't have enough money, and then we look at the tax return and find some tax saving opportunities people are missing out on. And it's creating money seemingly out of thin air just by some tax strategies people are missing. So now we have a new proposed tax law coming, which is a shakeup of last year's tax returns and this year's tax returns, coming into the forefront of maybe being two totally separate things, totally different things, where we have different strategies. Then we can't rely on last year's strategies to work this year because of the tax law changes. And if we didn't adapt, we're still doing the same old things, trying to itemize expenses that aren't tax deductible anymore, or missing out on expenses and deductions that didn't exist the year before, or not maximizing our capital gains and losses correctly, or not even knowing we're in the zero capital gains tax bracket like I've talked about before, and missing out on those strategies entirely. So there's so many areas to look into, it could sometimes seem overwhelming. That's why I get to, at the beginning of every year and at the end of every year, this step back and look forward. This process of just simplifying and looking at each component one by one, almost like we tear a puzzle apart and then reassemble it again. So we're a little better aware of all the pieces and how they fit, which is missing in a lot of plans. I know that. How do I know that? Because most people don't have a plan. That's how. It's something that at the beginning of the year, we look at our health and we go on a diet and we join a gym and we forget our financial health really is as much, I think it's been proven, as a component of our physical health by relieving financial stress is actually leading to a healthier lifestyle physically. And we've seen many studies showing that financial stress sometimes leads toward more marital disputes than would be happening if we had stable financial situations in the marriage. So there's a lot to this. And at this time of year, it's a perfect time to stop and try to get some control over this. So those are some of the areas. Now, here are some of the mechanical steps you can go through. Number one, pull out and put in separate folders these areas. These are the areas, the general areas of financial planning. Number one, you need a folder, I think, called protection. And then we're going to put some folders inside it. Protection means protecting what you already have if something goes wrong from losing everything you already have. So this is from where you are right now. Whatever you have right now, you want to make sure not to at least lose or go backwards. In financial protection, it is your disability insurance, that is usually group insurance. Find where it is or what it is, and make sure that you are insured if either of you get disabled and lose your income, either temporarily or permanently. Get a folder for disability insurance. It may be empty. You may look at group disability for both employers. You may not have any disability insurance, but create the folder in the protection bin folder. Put a folder in there, disability insurance for yourself. Put a folder in there, disability insurance for your spouse. Then another protection area. If something happens to either of you and you predecease the other, what happens to the income that both incomes are necessary to provide for the family? So you have a life insurance folder for yourself and a life insurance folder for the spouse. Then that's your protection. And then you look in the protection folder for automobile and homeowners insurance, and that is property insurance and liability insurance. What I'm looking at there is property insurance. Normally we're after making sure the house is protected. And then liability insurance is a tag-on coverage with the property insurance for the home. But we're also looking at the cars. Property insurance for the vehicles and liability insurance for if we have an accident. And then the other area is umbrella liability, which I've talked about. So there should be really 3 folders there: homeowners, auto, and umbrella liability coverage, which covers a higher limit over what the auto and homeowners can provide for liability. That's your protection folder. Now we get to your, let's say, savings and retirement folder. I'm skipping taxes for a minute because that's some strategies. We go to your retirement and savings folder, and I want you to put college. And I need for each of your children that you now have or plan to have, put a folder in there, one for each child. So 3 college folders. And there are different age time periods, and there are different funding methods there. So you're going to have college in there. And then you're going to have retirement. Those are your goals. And sometimes you're going to have, if you want to, a vacation folder or some expenses like that that you want to build throughout each year, or maybe even a number of years, like a vacation home that you want to try to acquire someday. So you'll put that in that folder, that savings and retirement folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to target or earmark goals and amounts and deadline dates by which we want those goals to be accomplished. And then after the retirement and savings folder, that's when we then get into the strategies folder on being efficient. And that's our tax folder there. Now we also have, we circle around after the tax folder. I want you to put your tax returns in that folder. And then I want you to have another folder for each year called tax strategies. The reason is most people prepare their returns, but most people never plan their taxes. And you can. You can figure out, what if I did this? Or what if I did that? What if I changed this? What if I changed that? What lines on these tax returns are blank? Like on the first page, you say, I don't have an IRA deduction. Could I have an IRA deduction? I wonder what a Roth IRA would do for my taxes. And that's where you look into this. I wonder what if. That's your what if strategies. They could save you money on taxes. Now, then we get to an area when we're in retirement. We also have to deal now with protection. And here comes the main areas are health and long-term care. Sometimes longevity, and will our money last long enough? And that was in the retirement bucket, actually, because through the shows I kind of teach how to make sure you have enough money in retirement. But the last folder that I want you to have are in the later years, your senior years, and it's back to a protection bucket. I want you to have a folder in there for long-term care, and I want you to have a folder in there for health, because those are the two biggest looming expenses other than inflation that will cripple a retirement plan. The other one that will actually cripple a retirement plan is living too long, and that's happening a lot. People are living too long for their finances. Well, you know, I'd like to say that's due to bad planning or lack of planning, and maybe sometimes it is, but other times it's not. It's just a matter of living longer than we expected to live, and we didn't plan for the finances to have to last that long. So we need to factor that in as another risk. And then finally, you have a folder in the back called legacy planning. And that is the folder where you want to set aside or create assets to maybe perpetuate or create a legacy that while you were here and you wanted to help either charities or, you know, beneficiaries, or maybe a handicapped, somebody underprivileged, someone there, you may want to create a legacy fund, American Cancer Society or Salvation Army or churches, or a legacy account that you say, I wanted my life to stand for something beyond myself. Those would be the folders that I would have you all set up in the beginning of the year, set it up at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, and to begin creating a framework for financial planning and a purpose for yourselves. You have more control over your finances than you think if you just take some time, organize it, categorize it, and coordinate it. All right, folks, I appreciate everyone tuning in to another edition of All Things Financial. We'll be back again next week.